So I recently got around to playing Silent Hill 3, one of the most highly acclaimed horror games ever made, and although I enjoyed my time with it, my experience was definitely soured by some of the problems I feel it has. Now, while none of these problems are game breaking or will make you quit mid playthrough, I do think that they ruined the atmosphere and immersion that the game otherwise did well to build up. So first up, let's talk about the puzzles. The Silent Hill franchise has a history of including bizarre puzzles in its games, such as the rubber ball puzzle from Silent Hill and the orange juice puzzle from Silent Hill 2, but this game ups the nonsense of its puzzles to a point where it becomes detrimental to the overall horror experience. The first of these puzzles entails Heather, the sassy, no-nonsense teenager, trying to get a key from under a wooden pallet. She can clearly see the key between the gaps but can't reach it. There are also boxes of books on top of the pallet, stopping her from just lifting it up. Now, what would you, a sane, intellectual problem solver, do in this situation? Would you A. move the boxes off the pallet one by one, B. push the boxes off the pallet, or C. run around a monster-infested shopping mall looking for a freaking bread tongs to grab the key from between the gap? I mean, sure, they wanted to portray Heather as your typical high school girl who won't lift a finger if it requires too much effort, but if she can spend her time running around the place dodging horrific creatures with her pockets full of random shit that might come in handy, then surely she can push a freaking box over to get a key. And this is just the start. Several of the puzzles in this game require you to actually die before noticing that there's a puzzle there to avoid getting murdered. The hairdryer puzzle is my least favourite part of the game, simply because it's so obscure and unfair that it completely takes you out of the game and leaves you thinking, what just happened? Allow me to explain. So you find a hairdryer in a room and pick it up because, you know, in case you run out of ammo in your various weapons, you could always slowly warm up the grotesque creatures that are trying to munch on your face. You later enter a room with a platform over some murky water. Being the no-nonsense butt-kicking Heather that you are, you strut your stuff across the platform and are instantly murdered by an unseen tentacle monster lurking in the water below. There's no warning or indication of the danger, bar a vague, easily disregarded sign in the previous room, so the death comes as a shock for anyone playing for their first time. It isn't until you replay up to this point again and notice the tiny little power socket on the wall that you're apparently supposed to know that this is where you plug in your hairdryer to throw into the water to fry the monster, that you somehow know is there because you just died from it. And there's the problem. This puzzle requires you to die in order for you to solve it, but there are no in-game mechanics that make sense for Heather to know anything from before she respawned, like there is in games like Dark Souls. The puzzle completely breaks the immersion that the game has done well to create up until this point. Another thing I'd like to touch on is the increase in difficulty from previous games. It kind of reminds me of how the creators of Dark Souls 2 wanted to capitalize on the popularity of the difficulty in the first game, so they just included a bunch of BS enemy ambushes and traps just to punish the player for playing the game. In two separate instances in the hospital, you enter a room and are immediately swarmed by 3 nurses, leaving you with no options other than to retreat through the door you just came through or to try and engage the nurses in combat. Even when using the best weapon for this situation, the shotgun, you're very likely to take a decent amount of damage here. Then once you've dispatched of the nurses, you explore the room to find absolutely nothing in one of them and only a medkit in the other. You would assume that the amount of enemies in the room would allude to something more valuable, but no, the risk far outweighs the reward. It's annoying and just seems like the game is trying to mess with you for no good reason. And I know the game gives you plenty of beef jerky to distract enemies, but in my experience that does sweet feck all. I also think the soundtrack was downgraded in this game and that the music being played often didn't suit the tone of the scene. The worst instance of this is when Heather encounters Douglas in the mall. The tone of the scene is clearly that of discomfort and possible danger, but the music in the background sounds like something you'd hear in an Australian soap opera opening. The whole time it played, I just felt frustrated because of how poorly it fit what was happening on screen. That coupled with the god-awful voice acting from Douglas made me dread what the rest of the game had in store for me. This is only 10 minutes into the game and I already wished I was playing Silent Hill 2 instead. Speaking of bad voice acting, for some reason all the characters in this game except maybe Heather have the worst voice acting performances I've ever heard. It's almost as if they blew their entire voice acting budget on Heather and had to pull in random English speaking tourists from the streets outside to do the rest. Everyone seems like they belong in a zero budget student film and display so little human emotion in their performance that they probably fail those I am not a robot internet security tests. So those are the main things I wanted to touch on in this video, and although I did rag on this game a lot, I do have a lot of praises for it too. The Otherworld version of Silent Hill looks phenomenally horrific. No other horror game environment compares in terms of oppressive atmosphere, and each gore-drenched, decaying location forces the horrors of this world into your mind whether you realize it or not. It definitely feels like the most nightmarish of the Silent Hills so far. Ammo scarcity is increased from Silent Hill 1 and 2, which is a good thing. I never felt like I had to conserve ammo in those games, and I'd always finish the game with enough firepower to play through it again without any pickups, but after only a few engagements in this game I was already running low and had to switch on my playstyle. And that's about it. Those are my thoughts from my first playthrough of Silent Hill 3. Thanks for watching, see you next time. Oh, and subscribe to Couple Cakes.